Story 1. My grandfather stole a red pepper shaker from an Italian restaurant many years ago. The year after he passed, we went to the same restaurant. In honor of him, I stole a Parmesan shaker for a matching pair. Rest in peace, Grandpa. Story 2. I couldn't pick up the pieces after my divorce. I would go weeks without showering or brushing my teeth. I found my baby blanket from my youth in a trunk and wrapped it around myself that night. Best sleep I had had in years. I keep it in my bed since then. I am a 42-year-old man. Story 3. When I was maybe 7, I went to the grocery store with my mother. When she was checking out, I went to turn the gumball machine to see if anyone left quarters in there and didn't spin it all the way. Well, one of them was broken, and I spun it until my pockets were full of gumballs. When we got in the car, my mother asked what was in my pockets. And I told her nothing. She still knows nothing to this day. She did, however, say, "If one of those machines was broken and you just kept turning them, that's stealing." I sure fooled her. Story 4. My dad had a pot pipe made of wood in the garage. I used to smoke out of it all the time because he didn't realize I knew it was there. Anyway, I didn't have a lighter one day, and I used a blowtorch in the garage to smoke out of it. I completely destroyed the pipe. About 15 years later, my dad tells me about how he lost this pipe he made in his shop class in the 1970s. Oops. Story 5. My fiancé and partner of almost 8 years broke up with me a few months ago. I've realized I was so emotionally dependent on him that I don't know how to exist as my own person. I have suicidal thoughts sometimes from the stress and pain of not being able to be with him. No one really gets it. I genuinely think I will never love anyone as much as I love him, and I'm scared I'll end up alone for the rest of my life. Edit. Wow. Thanks to everyone for leaving such sweet and inspiring comments. I am in an intensive therapy program right now and have told others, including professionals, about the concerning thoughts and am being helped with those. It really does make a difference knowing that so many others have been through the same thing and have made it out okay on the other side, and for some of you, even better on the other side. Story 6. I've lived a boring, non-secretive life, but my great-grandfather once told me a story about when he killed a man with a baseball bat for trying to rob the bar he owned, and the regulars of the bar stashed the body somewhere, and nobody ever talked about it again. He then put his finger to his mouth and said, "Sure, don't tell anyone." So there you go. Sorry, Grandpa. This happened in Brazil back in the 1960s. Grandpa is long gone. Did it really happen? I have no idea, but it was Brazil. Something similar to that probably happened during the time it took me to type this out. Brazil do be like that. Story 7. I stole my brother's Ghostbusters t-shirt and made an email account from the shirt napper to ransom it back to him as a mystery for him to solve. Unfortunately, he died a few weeks later without ever noticing the emails. Story 8. I want my dad to die. My dad is a piece of shit. He has tortured my mom and myself since childhood. He has had chondrosarcoma, bone cancer, for 4 years now. I have no remorse for him suffering from this. I'm rather angry that my family has to suffer because of it. I just hope it all comes to an end very soon so that I can live a peaceful life. It's so emotionally exhausting. Story 9. In 1996, I was 6 years old, and a friend told me that computer mouse balls were worth as much as gold. Foolishly and with no plan, I stole one from the classroom computer. Our teacher got extremely angry, and I got really scared I would get caught. He had us all leave the room and go in one by one so that whoever stole it could anonymously put it back. I was too scared that somebody might see, so I didn't put it back. He was furious with us. The next day, I was going to try to secretly return it, but a kid randomly confessed that he was the one who stole it, and his mom went to the store to buy a new one. He stood in front of the class with a written apology and everything. I should have taken a stand and said, "No, Kyle, you didn't steal it. I did." Shameful. Anyway, 28 years later, Kyle is a stripper at a gay nightclub. Story 10. Live in the only major urban center in a very rural area where there are all kinds of suburbs, road construction, gravel pits, and so on. Whenever I see heavy equipment that doesn't get moved or is left unattended, I sneak into the worksite at night, climb into the always unlocked bulldozer or whatever it is, and proceed to lay on the horn in the dead of night before scrambling away. It has been a decade since I started, and I think now I've honked the horns of just about every type of heavy machinery that has one. Story 11. In grade 7, I didn't want to do my book report, so I didn't go to the library to take out a book. When the project was almost due, I had a sudden change of heart because I didn't want to get in trouble with my parents, who were extremely strict. It was too late to go to the library to get a book because my teacher would have known and told my parents. So, I completely made up a book with a fake title and fake author, did my entire book report, and even drew a bonus picture to illustrate my favorite part of the book. The teacher told me I would have gotten an A if she had been able to find the book in the library when she looked. I acted as if I had no idea where the book had gone, and I swore up and down that I returned it to the library. Story 12. In grade 6 in 1986, we were asked to write a short story during class. I wrote as much of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy as I could in the hour provided. I knew it word for word. I got as far as the interior of the Vogon ship before time ran out. Story 13. Back in the day, I would go to Walmart and Kmart and wipe the hard drives of every personal computer on display once every 2 or 3 weeks. I did this for a couple of years. I taught a friend to format from the command prompt, and he started doing it too. He taught another person. After a while, all the personal computers on display at the megastores in about 20 counties around us were periodically being formatted and erased. Years later, I was talking to a guy who had worked for Walmart for about 30 years, and he was telling me how someone used to format all the personal computers in the 2 Walmarts he worked in. He worked in the 2 counties I frequented most. The funny thing was, they actually set up a sting operation to catch the felonious formatter, and the guy was paid overtime to walk the electronics section as a plainclothes customer for about 3 months but never caught the person. Even though I'm pretty sure I was still formatting the drives periodically, somehow we missed each other. For the record, I was only blowing off steam and figured that what I was doing was harmless shenanigans. I've never been in any kind of trouble with the law, and I didn't grow up to be a serial killer. But every now and then, when I walk through a computer store, I get the itch. Story 14. Circa 2004. In first grade, I was your typical gifted kid, since turned burnout, of course. I absolutely loved my teacher. One day, I arrived to a new face greeting me at the classroom door. This was the first time I had ever encountered a substitute teacher. This substitute in particular was a mean, nasty woman who reeked of cigarettes. Within the first hour of class, she told me to shut up. I had never been in trouble at school before, and those 2 words broke my little teacher's pet heart. Yes, this is my villain origin story. I immediately decided to plan my escape. At lunch and recess, I grabbed my backpack, jacket, and rain boots and walked straight out the front door. I still have no idea how a 5-year-old could walk out the front doors of a school completely unnoticed. Nonetheless, there I was. The world was my oyster. I walked straight home singing, "I'm going home and nobody can stop me. Ha 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 ha," to the tune of Old MacDonald for 4 kilometers. I had done it. I was home free. When I got there, I saw my babysitter's car in the driveway. Filled with panic, I remembered that my little brother had stayed home sick today. Terrified of disappointing my babysitter, I had to make a decision. Return to the bad lady at school, or face the wrath of a 20-year-old girl who, in all reality, would have just been completely stunned? I chose the former and bolted up the hill in our town another 4 kilometers in the pouring rain. Soaking wet, I ran through the side entrance of the school adjacent to the playground, put my bag back in my locker, and sprinted into my classroom. The substitute stared at me for a second. I thought I was toast. After what felt like forever, she barked at me to change out of my rain boots and put on my indoor shoes. It dawned on me that although I must have been gone almost 2 hours, she hadn't even noticed I had left. My first jailbreak and my first cover-up story, both successful missions. I never told a soul about my rainy day adventure. If you're out there, chain smoker substitute teacher, I hope you found a new career path. Story 15. In 3rd grade, I was at a birthday party and just learned the word asshole. I was showing the other kids how to use it in a sentence and called this kid Cody an asshole as an example. Apparently, he told his mom that I called him an asshole, And then his mom went and told all the other parents and even my third-grade teacher that I was a foul-mouthed kid who called people assholes. It became a whole thing with multiple parent meetings and phone calls for what felt like a whole week. The birthday boy, Freddie, finally came forward and vouched for me and said I never called anyone an asshole and that I was the nicest at the party. Anyway, I feel like I got away scot-free and Cody was indeed an asshole snitch. Story 16. As a teenager in the 90s, my house and yard were always getting toilet papered and egged. Somehow it was my fault, and my parents would be angry at me and make me clean it up every weekend. I found out the person who was doing it and took a big nasty mess in a plastic bag and put it in his mailbox. All the pranks stopped immediately after that. Not my proudest moment, but I think it got my point across. Story 17. When I was in 9th grade, there was a girl who relentlessly bullied me for being skinny, telling anyone who would listen I had an eating disorder. I got a hold of her phone number somehow and used the old star 67 trick and called every night at 3 in the morning on the dot and breathed heavily into the phone when she'd answer for several weeks. I even set an alarm to wake myself up to do it. If she wasn't going to give me peace during the day, I wasn't going to give her peace at night. Story 18. When I was 12 years old, I saw my dad's camcorder in their room, and I was curious, so I tried to play what was on it. To my surprise, it was a sex video. I was so innocent back then. It was my first time seeing anything like that. But that was not the worst part. The shocking thing was who I saw in the video. It was my dad with another woman, not my mom, but our maid. I was so shocked I didn't even know how to process it. Then I turned off the camcorder and went downstairs. After a few hours, my dad called me and asked if I had tinkered with his camcorder. And of course, out of fear, I said I had not. He couldn't ask me for more information since he was cheating with another woman. So he let it pass and we never talked about it again. Until now, I never told a soul about what I saw at that moment. Story 19. I was molested by my cousin. Nobody knows. He recently died from a drug overdose, and everyone kept asking why I wasn't upset. I was about 8 or 9 when this happened. I'm 41 now. I remember it happening several times. He was 16 or 17. I haven't said anything to my family, as my mom and his mom, who are sisters, are very close. Story 20. Had a mental break when I was on deployment in the Navy. I decided to jump off the side of the ship in front of people in the middle of the Indian Ocean. I was in the water for over an hour when they found me. Haven't said a word about it in almost 20 years. Story 21. When I was 11 years old, I had an upstairs neighbor who was in the Marines. I idolized this guy. He was, in my mind, the real American hero. He'd pull up in his Jeep Wrangler and step out in crisp camouflage looking like a soldier. He was polite to my mom and dad, always saying, "Good morning, sir," or "ma'am." He had a wife who was friends with my mom and a little daughter who was friends with my little sister. We'd go fishing, camping, and hiking, and one day he introduced me to shooting. I was aware of guns but had never actually seen them up close, let alone shot them. He taught me how to use a rifle with a very easy-to-shoot .22 caliber long rifle. Anyway, one night he was away, and my sister and I were upstairs hanging out with his wife and daughter, watching TV, eating Cheez-Its, just being kids. The mom was in her room and we were in the living room. My sister and the daughter went to play with a dollhouse and I got curious and started looking around. I found the rifle in a black canvas bag in a closet. Naturally, I opened it up, took the rifle out, and took it to the balcony, where I proceeded to go prone and look down the scope. I kept thinking to myself, whoa, it's even better when you're up higher. You can see all kinds of stuff better. Wow, and look at that car passing by. Of course, I was aiming at it, and I had my finger on the trigger, and for some reason, my foolish 11-year-old brain never imagined the rifle was loaded and ready to fire. So as I'm aiming at the car passing, maybe 80 yards away, traveling slowly, I pulled the trigger. The round hit the rear passenger window and it shattered. The vehicle drifted to the right and crashed into a border wall. I was horrified and rushed back inside, quickly stuffing the rifle back in the bag, placing it upright in the closet corner where I'd found it. And as this was happening, I could hear the mom getting up and asking, "What's going on? What was that?" My heart was racing. I just quickly closed the closet door and ran. I left the apartment quickly, went downstairs to my place, ran inside, ran to my bathroom, and hid in the tub with the lights off. Oh boy, the aftermath. There was an active manhunt, police and helicopters and searchlights. They came to knock at the doors. My dad was working, and my mom had left us with the upstairs neighbor to run errands. The upstairs lady had no idea what had happened. They asked her questions, but she said she was sleeping and only heard a pop. I heard later that the driver was actually hit, and there was an open investigation. A week after the incident, the Marine came downstairs to see if I was around because he wanted to talk to me. We took a walk, and he told me that he knew it was me. I never slid the bolt back to eject the spent cartridge, and it stayed in the rifle the entire time. He said he wouldn't say anything, but that I was not allowed back upstairs ever again, and he was disappointed because I broke his trust. They moved shortly after, and I never saw them again. I never told anyone, and the guilt ate me up my whole life, but I was too scared to tell the truth. This happened in 1995, so 29 years ago. This is a canon event in my life. You have no idea how much this affected me. I went from being a sweet, outgoing Boy Scout, a prosocial fifth grader, to a reclusive, quiet, introverted, antisocial sixth grader and beyond. I started skipping school. I started smoking weed and doing graffiti at 12 years old because I discovered the bad kids. Or rather, I stumbled upon them smoking weed in the staircases during my neighborhood wanderings during school hours. I became a bad kid. I was inducted into their group of taggers, and we would trespass onto different school properties at night to tag. They were much older, 16 and 17-year-olds. They nicknamed me Baby Face because I was 12. I would source spray paint and other supplies for them like paint markers because I was good at stealing from the arts and crafts store without ever getting caught. I became a kleptomaniac. I would steal from every store. That went on for a while until one day, while skipping school, I wandered into a mom-and-pop bookstore. I walked into the political science section and discovered The Anarchist's Cookbook by chance in 1997. I started reading books in that political science section on topics beyond my 13-year-old scope of reference. History, war, economics, revolution, etc. I became fascinated by guns, weapons, explosives, and the counterculture movement, and I started experimenting. I started stealing chemicals from my science teacher in 8th grade because it was the 90s. I was stealing hydrochloric acid, sulfuric acid, sodium hydroxide, and then I started learning about triple displacement reactions and gas production. I crafted acid bombs that I would blow up in the neighborhood. I would steal gasoline containers from the landscaping guys who came to cut grass. I started setting things on fire outside. I became a pyromaniac. I set a huge dumpster in the neighborhood on fire and climbed up a tree to watch in secret as the fire department came to put it out. It was thrilling. I was effectively the neighborhood terrorist. No one knew it was me. My parents, the neighbors, the police, the neighborhood management, my little sister who looked up to me. No one knew. I was living this secret double life as a maniac. Nobody was watching me. There was no mass surveillance apparatus in school. It was a different world, a completely different environment. Cell phones were not yet ubiquitous in our society, and nobody knew where I was at every single moment. It all came to a head when I started planning on creating actual TNT, and my idea was to blow up a car. I started gathering lab equipment and learning about nitration. My mom finally caught me. I had a top-secret briefcase with all my notes, basically a diary of my exploits and hand-transcribed recipes for the nitration of toluene and the synthesis of other volatile compounds, and she found it. There was a family intervention. I did go to therapy, and they did put me on medication, and eventually my behaviors changed through dialectical behavior therapy. I started going back to school regularly and not skipping. Then I discovered girls, of course. I then moved to a different area. I made new friends, started hanging out at the mall, going to the movies, and doing normal teenager stuff. I got a girlfriend at 15, then a different one at 16, and I kept being lucky with girls. On and on it went. Eventually, I went to college, graduated, got a job, started working, and life just kept rolling. Now I'm 40, and I have a full-time job, an apartment, a car payment, insurance, all the bills. I have 2 cats, and I love them. I didn't become the school shooter, and I didn't become Ted Kaczynski. The end.